All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Listen Up, Santa Paula.
Yes, I'm back in my own seat now.
You are. We got the bar behind you with a cloth.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see that you're finally covering that up.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
I do have some good stuff over here. Something called the Hurricane.
Ah, okay.
No idea. It just sounds nasty.
You haven't been to New Orleans, right?
No, I haven't.
Yeah. You got to go to New Orleans and try Hurricane. I think less than one will knock you out.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Sip. Anyway, we are live. Last week, we ran the show live, but like an idiot, I forgot to choose the channels to display it on.
Mm-hmm.
So it never actually went onto the Facebook or anything like that.
Ah,
so didn't realize that. And all of a sudden I'm like, where's all the postings?
Yeah.
So this week we have a very special guest. So I wanted to make darn sure, one, that we were in fact live. Two, that he had really good lighting on him to make him look good, handsome.
He's a handsome devil.
Yes,
so, yeah, you got to,
See, they're going to think you're talking about me. But that's okay. We will be right back to find out more after this.
Rough Edge FM. Irritatingly irresistible internet radio at roughedgefm.com.
There's so much going on in your community that even in this age of information, it's tough to keep up. This show will help. It's all about what's new, what's happening, and what's out there. So if you're ready, sit back and listen up, Santa Paula.
That's right. Listen up, Santa Paula. It's your Wednesday morning wake-up call.
We're a little early today.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Are we?
Yeah.
No, actually, we're almost starting on time.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Yeah, we're about 4 minutes early.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Anyway, so I don't know if you remember this, but this was our first guest that we ever had on the show.
Yes. Gave our show credibility.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping that this does not signify that this is going to be our last guest.
Yeah, I don't know.
But
we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, we'll see. Anyways, I'm going to bring Carlos to the stage. How you doing, Carlos?
Well, good morning, James and John. Thank you. So, yeah, I was one of the first people to come on. And how many shows have occurred since then?
We are at show number 146.
Wow. So either I didn't do very well the first time that you ran out of people to interview, or you decided, let's bring back somebody from the blast from the past.
Well, I think you were the only roast that we actually had, too. Because if I remember correctly, we roasted you the whole time.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. I'm used to that.
Yeah. Anyway, you're not here to actually talk about yourself, although I know it is one of your favorite subjects. But there's something else you wanted to talk about. So what's going on?
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. I actually would like to talk about the Independent Order of Odd Fellows. Mm-hmm. And I introduced myself by saying I'm an odd fellow, but then I have to say, no, actually, I'm an odd fellow. Mm-hmm. And so I'd like to explain a little bit about that and how I got into it.
Okay. So what do you mean independent order? Is it because every location is independent from each other, or?
No, because it started in the early 1800s in England by a man named Thomas Wildy, or Wildy. They pronounce it two different ways. And he was in the Manchester Unity and decided that he would get together a group of men to help each other. It would be a member benefit group. So they would shelter and educate the orphan, relieve the distressed, and bury the dead. And then later on, they added to elevate the character of man. Mm-hmm. Now, all these men came from odd jobs, but also people thought that was odd behavior for men to have, because if you think about it, there was no health insurance. There wasn't a whole lot of things to help people. And so people thought that was odd behavior. So they called them the Odd Fellows. And since they were the Odd Fellows in England, well, after a time, just like everybody else started leaving England and gaining their own independence, just like the United States became independent of England, mm-hmm. So did the Odd Fellows. So we couldn't be called the Odd Fellows. So we were called the Independent Order of Odd Fellows.
Okay.
That's how it got started. Okay.
So in England, is the original Odd Fellows still assembled?
There are Odd Fellows in several countries, and there's still Odd Fellows in England, yes.
Okay. And so it was originally formed for what?
It was a member benefit group, but it was all men. And so it was to shelter and educate the orphan,
okay,
relieve the distressed, and bury the dead, and then later to elevate the character of man.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And so Who's the orphan?
The orphans are anybody that was left behind when people died from either disease or work injuries, and so the members would take care of them. They would help the members.
So that's got to be odd in itself, because was it men who would normally take on that role of taking care of an orphan, or would that have normally been a woman?
Well, what happened was Oddfellows began forming orphanages. For many years, we had orphanages, and now we have the children's home in San Jose, which is called the Rebecca's Children's Home. And they now are moving away from being orphanages because there's so many programs to help people that have become orphaned that now it's a culinary academy where they teach young people to be cooks and chefs.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
And I call it the Rebecca's Children's because the counterpart of the Oddfellows are the Rebeccas.
Oh, really? Okay. Now, there are women in the Oddfellows at this point, right?
Yes, but that didn't occur till about the 80s,
Okay.
the 1980s.
So is that kind of like the Boys and the Girl Scouts, where the Girl Scouts were now allowed to join the Boy Scouts, but they had the Girl Scouts, so the
Yes.
Rebeccas would be the Girl Scouts?
Yeah, so backing up a little bit, when the Oddfellows first started, it was all men, and they would go off and do the secret stuff that we do. You know, there's secret handshakes and secret passwords and ceremonies in order to be an Oddfellow. And so the women formed the Rebeccas in the mid 1800s, and it was a women's organization. You know, like today we had the Sir Optimus and Rotary. Well, they have the Rebeccas, and they formed their own organization. And like the Oddfellows, the person that's ultimately in charge is called the Grand Master, whereas in the Rebeccas, the female in charge is called the President.
Were they a lot of the wives and spouses and stuff that were part of that? Or was it just
Not necessarily,
yeah.
but it could have been. And, you know, interestingly enough, you know, sometimes the men have a counterpart.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know this, but, you know, John Marcus and I are in Rotary. And when it was a men-only Rotary club, the women were allowed to come to social events, and they were called the Rotary Anns.
Yes.
So,
Wow.
yeah. So anyway, so they formed the Rebeccas, and then they also had two other parts of the order, which were called the Theta Rose, which is a juvenile portion, and the Canton and the Patriarchs Militant, allowing people that were honorably served in the military to join that part of that branch of the order. So then I'll fast forward real quick. So moving fast forward to, you know, where all these different organizations were each doing their own thing, there were challenges to the United States Supreme Court where women said, you know, we want to vote, we want to be part of men's club. And so the United States Supreme Court said, yes, you will allow women to join your organizations. Absent, I believe this may be the only one, but the Masons, because they're just totally religious. They don't rely on any kind of funding, so they can do whatever they want. But the Oddfellows started to let women in. And interestingly enough, in the 80s, Rotary did as well. And we know this story because we have some female members and in Rotary, many in fact. And when they announced that women were going to be allowed to join Rotary, there was at least a couple of men that said, no, we don't want women. And if you let them join, I'm going to quit. And so they allowed women to join Rotary, and they quit. So when we started allowing women to join the Oddfellows, I joined our local lodge number 314 in 2006. And in 2010, we decided, you know, let's let women join. Not that we excluded them before, but now is openly seeking women. And one of the members told me, no, we can't let women join. And we said, yes, we are. And he said, well, if you let women join, I'm going to quit. And so we let women join, and he quit. But I'll tell you what, and I say this so sincerely, and that is women in organizations have been the salvation of organizations because it brings a different mindset, and they're, you know, they are do type people. And so in our organization, we have probably 40% women. And now this is the first time this has happened in California. Last year, we elected 5 of the officers, which have been historically men. All 5 are women.
You know, it's kind of like the Catholic Church. At some point, they're going to have to let women become priests. And as soon as they do that, there won't be a shortage of priests in the United States. Because it's, you know, it's just, I think women have, that's their mindset. You know, they're maternal, they are caretakers, And so I think having women as part of the organization is just, it makes sense to keep things alive. Because, a lot of us men are like, hey, so oh, look at the butterfly. So John and I, by the way, have a secret handshake. And so we have our own fraternal organization.
Oh, okay.
Don't we?
I missed that day of the handshake.
Oh, darn.
Listen. So
I always wanted a secret handshake. So,
but I got to segue into, it's great to belong. We all want to belong to something, whether it's a family unit, friendships, service clubs. But one thing or a few things that are different about the Oddfellows is historically, we own our own building. Whereas like Rotary doesn't own this building, Optimist doesn't own this building, but we own our buildings. Mm-hmm. Now, I say we own it. Basically, the Grand Lodge of California owns it. We are the caretakers as the organization, the elected officials. Mm-hmm. But, to belong to an organization that is ingrained in some religious background, but also a lot of ritualistic stuff to the point where we have secret handshakes, secret passwords, secret signs. And not only that, but there's a whole process to get inducted into the Oddfellows with interviews and then what's called the initiatory, where they initiate you into why we are what we are and what we do. And I find that very intriguing. And that's part of the reason that I was so involved in it from the beginning. It was something totally different than anything I'd ever done before.
So what is the major focus for the Oddfellows?
Different organizations have different things. So going back to the original concept of what we used to do, lodges have to sustain themselves. So what they do is you cannot have an organization that has a business meeting once a month and a social, and that's it, because you're going to lose members. You got to do things that bring the community in, that benefits your members and is fun. And I'll tell you, the new Grand Master of California, her name is Rita Cooper. When she ran for office, she said, we need to have fun. And so that's her goal this year, is to have her officers go out and talk not only to the community, but other lodges and share those ideas to find out, what are you doing that's fun? What are you doing that involves your community? Share those ideas so that you don't just have a lodge that you have the average age being 80 years old and everybody goes to a meeting, goes home, because that's not fun. But you want to do things like what we do. We have a scholarship. We help out with the Halloween carnival. We have done an art museum in our lodge. We do the train display every year. So we reach out to the community, and I think the Oddfellows are going to help here in the next couple of weeks for the Canine fundraiser, and we've done it for a few years. So there's things that you should do to involve your community and your family. And that's one thing that I should mention is when you have a husband and wife that join an Oddfellows Lodge together, it also shares the fact that you're both doing something for the community and your lodge. But also the men aren't sinking off to a secret meeting. You're inclusive of your family.
Yeah.
So you own the clock tower?
Yes, we have owned it since April 26th, 1884. Now, why that's significant is because the city of Santa Paula got its boundaries established in 1875. And the reason that's important, because that's when it basically became a township. And then on April 22nd, 1902, the city was incorporated as a city. So we actually, the Oddfellows, predate the city of Santa Paula's incorporation by 18 years.
Wow.
In that same location. And so whenever you look around town, there's always something historic that happened somewhere. And so when we built our building back in 1884, and the city was established as a city, in December of 1903, there was a big fire that destroyed downtown. Now, there's a lot of speculation as to what happened. As we know, the Thomas Fire happened in December. Mm-hmm. So the east winds come through, but all it takes is one spark, and they think it might have been from a stable. Anyway, it burned all of downtown. And at that point, all we had for fire prevention was a bucket brigade. And that's when they said, this bucket brigade ain't working. Okay. So that's when they established the Santa Paula Volunteer Fire Department, December of 1903. And then 2 years later, in January through March of 1905, they set the cornerstone and they rebuilt the building where it stands now. Mm-hmm. Now, in our blueprints, there's a blueprint of the building without a clock tower because we weren't going to build one. And the townspeople said, boy, it would be nice to have a clock tower, but I think it costs $8,700 to build a building in $1905. Well, they didn't have the extra money to buy a clock or build a clock tower. So we have a ledger at the lodge where it has the donations of what people donated, 50 cents, a quarter. The highest denomination was $25. And they bought a Seth Thomas clock with a 4-way facing differential that sends the mechanism 4 different ways. And they built the clock tower. And not only that, but the box that it came in, that's where it sits in the clock tower. And there's a few people that have been able to go up and see it. And it's really unique, but it was run by a 500-pound weight that somebody had to crank up every week. And I met that man several years ago. He used to go up there every week and crank it up, and it would run it like a grandfather clock.
Wow.
But then in 1952, they added an electric motor, which is about the size of a phone.
Yeah.
And that's what runs the clock now, the 4 clock faces.
Wow.
That's
That
amazing.
is so interesting. Yeah.
So with the clock tower, it's kind of a historical, people associate Santa Paula to the clock tower. And so it ends up appearing in a lot of pictures and all that kind of stuff. So as a private owner of that building, is there any issues with people using the clock tower in photographs or in promotional material or anything like that?
No, it's pretty much become public domain because it's been around in so many postcards and photographs and movies, Leave It to Beaver and the Joe Dirt and those kind of movies and commercials that come downtown. And we're just more than happy that it exists on advertising, on pictures. Yeah, we're just happy that it's out there for the public to enjoy.
The most iconic symbol we have in Santa Paula.
Yeah.
Everybody sees it, they know exactly where they're at. Even more, I think, than the SP on the mountain. So, yeah.
Yeah, that and, the railroad, the train depot.
Yeah.
But I mean, almost everywhere you see anything related to Santa Paula, it's got the tower in the background.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly enough, when you think about local landmarks, we have a plaque on the front of the building. I think it might be Ventura County Landmark 29, I believe. Anyway, it designates the clock tower as a landmark, but not the building.
Really?
Yeah. So it designates the clock tower. Just the tower.
Oh, that's interesting.
I thought the whole building was done too.
Just the tower.
Wow.
That's interesting. So for today, what does the Oddfellows do within the community as far as to help serve the people within the community?
I would think the biggest thing that we've done for the last 18 years, maybe 19 this year, is my good friend Wes Easley had a train, just like a lot of us growing up. We had one going around our Christmas tree, right? Well, he wanted to get a bigger train, so he did. He bought a bigger train, and he bought bigger track, and he bought like a 20-foot oval. That's a big oval, right? That's bigger than most living rooms. Mm-hmm. So we were both members of the Oddfellows, and he came down one day and set it up in our lodge room. And we'll talk a little bit in a bit. But he set it up in the lodge room with a 129 scale model of the depot, which him and his son painstakingly went down and measured, and then came back and did the conversion to 129 scale, and they built a depot. And they ran this train around the room and invited anybody that we could find to come up and see it. That's when he got the idea, why don't we do something a little bigger? And over the next 18, 19 years, it got bigger and bigger, where there's 13 trains running at once at 4 different levels. And it takes about a month for us to put it together. We run it for the whole month of December, and then it takes a month to bring it down.
Wow.
But what it does is it brings a community in to see our building, and it's become a stopping place for everybody during Christmas time, the holiday season, to come down. And I will tell you, we have seen people grow up. And I remember the first year there was this young lady who came in, and she was a college student up here at Thomas Aquinas, and then she got married, and then she came in and she was expecting a child. And then the next year she had a child, and then she was expecting a second one. And then the next year she had 2 and was expecting a third. And this went on for, I think, 4 years or 5 years.
Wow.
And we've also seen, and now they come in, and I think her son's almost as tall as she is. And then there was another man that he's come in with his son for years and years. And he was a little guy, probably 5 or 6. And I think we missed him last year because he said, "No, my son's gone off to college." But we saw that young man grow from a young kid to
Wow.
pre-adult,
That's so cool.
and so it does. It brings a lot of people, and every year people make it a point to come down. When they bring their family, they'll come down and visit us. So that's one of the things we do. But we started a scholarship when my friend Wes Easley passed away, and so we're continuing with his legacy by doing the Wes Easley Memorial Scholarship, and it's a vocational scholarship. And we've had art exhibits in the museum, in our lodge. We help out, as I said before, with events around town, whether it be the Easter egg hunt over years ago, the Halloween carnival. We've been in the parades. We've done things in the park.
Yeah.
So we stay involved. And then, a couple of weeks ago for the Historical Society, we did what was called Happy History Hour, where like in September, Janice Dickinson talked about the history of the airport, at the airport. And then in December, Ron Merson talked about the history of the St. Paul Christmas Parade at the Oil Museum. And so then a few weeks ago, we did the history of the Oddfellows in the Oddfellows, talking about the Oddfellows.
Yeah.
Nice. So what's significant about today? Is there like an anniversary or?
This weekend, Saturday, would be the 26th of April. And each year, as I said, we were chartered April 26, 1884. So we are 141 years of being an Oddfellows Lodge.
Wow.
And so we're doing an open house. And so we invite the public to come up, look at our lodge room. We still have much of the regalia, which is the collars and some of the props that we use, and also pictures that are historic. And so that's going to be open this Saturday from 3 to 7 p.m., just celebrating our anniversary as an Oddfellows Lodge. And it's, when you think about it, at one point there was over 500 lodges in California. We're number 314, and we're down California-wide. We're down to 110 lodges.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
The first lodge in the United States was Baltimore, Maryland. The first lodge in California was I think it was San Francisco, and we're number 314.
So there's only 100 left in California.
110 lodges with a little over 4,000 members.
Wow.
How many members are in the Santa Paula chapter?
We just increased by 3 in the last few months, so I think we're up to 35.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was it at your high point?
45, I believe.
45. Okay.
Because you have that cyclical thing where either people move away, pass away, and like for example, my son's been a member since he was 18, and he's in the Marine Corps, so he doesn't get home very often, but he's still a member on paper.
Yeah.
So I think what you'll find is a lot of organizations, Rotary and others included, on paper, it looks good because you have a strong showing of people, but in reality, probably about half are the active members.
Which
it's
is
like
the norm for most service clubs.
It's like the same
Yeah.
10% of the people do 90% of the work, but I can tell you that of our 35 members, we have a good strong 15 to 18. Well, there you go.
So,
Half that show up to meetings and help with all the work.
so how do you become an odd fellow?
The way you become an odd fellow is contrary to like other organizations where you have to ask. We can actually solicit, like, John, would you like to be an odd fellow? Would you like to be an odd fellow?
Mhm.
And I got to be careful because when I give my elevator speech, instead of being 2 minutes, it usually is like 5 or 10 minutes. And I see people like nodding off because it's a lot of history that I have in my head, but I really need to break it down to a 2 minute. What's important to you, what's important to your community, what's important to your family. And then you show them the lodge. And we've had many people join just because of the iconic building that we have and to be a part of it.
Yeah.
So why would somebody want to join the Oddfellows?
Well, number one, it's a reasonable cost. When we just had a lady said, okay, I'd like to join. And I said, I would sponsor her. And she goes, well, how much is it? I said, it's $60. She goes, oh, $60 a month. I can do that. And I said, no, it's $60 a year. So, and then of course you've got to tell them, because the criteria to be an odd fellow is you have to be of good moral character. You have to believe in a being higher than yourself, and you have to be willing to help your fellow man or mankind. So that's the big one, is you have to believe in a being higher than ourselves. And it doesn't mean you have to believe in a white man with a big beard sitting on a white cloud, but something that guides you to do the right thing. Because ultimately, we all join those organizations because they have criteria. For example, Rotary, the 4-way test, right? Mm-hmm. Is it the truth, right? Yeah. I got to sing the song to remember it. Help me out here. Is it the truth?
Uh-huh. Is it fair to all concerned?
Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And is it beneficial to all concerned?
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's the criteria for
Rotary. Every organization has their own criteria and stuff. And I know when I get people all the time that'll ask me that they want to get connected to the community, And I always tell them to look at all the service clubs because everyone offers something a little different. It's the same premise. You want to help your community, you want to grow your community, but everybody's a little different. And so I always tell them, try and find the right fit because, Oddfellows might not be a good fit, Optimist or Rotary, but you find that one organization that kind of fits your ideals of what you want to get done in the community. So, so we always try and promote as a whole. But it's interesting to hear what you guys offer too. That's totally different than what you see in like Rotary or some of the other organizations too. But it's a benefit to our community.
Can you share what a general meeting would be like?
We have to open in secrecy. So, you got to know the secret password, the secret sign. And once you open the meeting, there is a little bit of a prayer that they say. But then once everybody has been qualified to sit in the room, then the noble grand or the president runs the meeting, and they run it just like all other organizations. They follow Robert's Rules of Order. So it's just like you watch a council meeting with motions and objections and voting. We do the same thing. And we take care of the business of the lodge, which is everything from, have you visited anybody that's sick? What have we done for the community? Old business, new business. Is there any benefits that we need to disseminate either to our members or the community? And then you close the meeting in form as well. So
how often do you guys have meetings?
The first Thursday of the month is our business meeting. It begins at 7. We go in and have a light dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And then the business meeting begins at 7. It goes to about 8, sometimes 8:30. And then the third Thursday of the month, we start at 6:30, and it's a social event where we can have a meeting if we have to. But it's mostly for inviting our members and our guests of our members to come and have a potluck. Now, during major events during the year, like Christmas, sometimes we have it catered.
Nice.
You interested in joining? Sounds like you.
Yeah. Right now, with the new building and everything else, I'm pulling my hair out just trying to. You saw the video project list, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of my Achilles heels is I know a lot. Like I can build websites, I can do basic programming, I do accounting, I do video production, I can do photography. We have the magic shop, I perform magic shows, we have a podcast. And it's like, so if somebody comes along and says, hey, we need somebody, I can do that. Mm-hmm. And at some point I got to learn to say, I can do it, but no. Yeah. So.
Now, let me tell you, if you don't mind me interrupting, statewide, we have obviously sessions every year where we go and we take care of the business of the Oddfellows. That occurs in May with legislation and bills and voting for different positions. But we also have a 3 Links camp up in El Dorado County where it's open to the public, but it's where they, take people to go camping. Mm-hmm. We have, in our degrees, we have 4 degrees, and each lodge can perform their own degrees, but we have the unique ability to go to Wairika, and there's what's known as the cave, where they go do the degrees in a cave, and the first degree they do it during the day before, and then the next day they do 2 more degrees. Mm-hmm. And as they're doing the degrees, they time it so that the moon rises over Mount Shasta.
Wow.
That is cool.
Yeah, so that's a very unique thing that happens.
What is a degree?
So when you first become an Oddfellow, you get the initiatory degree. That means you're qualified to sit in the room. But in order for you to be able to sit in one of the appointed chairs or run for office of the 5 elected officials, which is the Noble Grand, the Vice Grand, the Financial Secretary, the Recording Secretary, and the Treasurer, you have to be a 3rd degree. So when you're going through the meetings, they will determine whether or not you're eligible to get the 1st degree, with the degree of friendship. The 2nd degree is the degree of brotherly love, and the 3rd degree is the degree of truth. And once you get the 3rd degree, you get to wear a scarlet collar, and then a scarlet collar, and you can have one of the offices. If you look at the top of the Oddfellows, we're what's known as a 3-link fraternity. That's 3 links in a sense: friendship, love, and truth.
So what's the 4th degree?
Well, the initiatory degree is where you first get in.
Okay.
And that's you're in the lots, and then you get your 1st, 2nd, and 3rd degrees.
Okay.
Yeah. That is cool. I never knew all this. That's a cool.
So can you share your because I know you can you share your what do you call it?
My regalia.
Regalia.
Yeah. So let me tell you that in addition to being Oddfellow, I'm also Rebecca.
Really?
Yeah. So in 2013, I joined the Redondo Beach Silvercrest Rebecca's. So I not only have an initiatory member, but I've gone through their degree work and I have their Grand Lodge degree. So I'm able to vote at their Grand Lodge sessions. And so I'm a Rebecca.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
You don't look like a Rebecca.
Well, undercover, I guess.
You gotta shave that mustache, maybe.
But I will share that, you know, in our lodge, you know, they have different hierarchies of the organization. So in the lodge, you have the Noble Grand, who's the president. Then by virtue of being your year as a Noble Grand, you become a past Grand and you wear a different collar. And then our district, which is Santa Paula, Santa Barbara, Ventura, Oxnard, and Van Nuys, that's our district. And we have what's called the district deputy that oversees those 5 lodges. Now in California, there's 25 districts. And so each one has a district deputy. And then when you get to the Grand Lodge level, we have a board of directors. And so the leadership of the organization is the Grand Master of California. And this year it's Dave Reed. The deputy Grand Master is Rita Cooper. And she's from Morse Lodge. And Dave Reed's from Davis Lodge. And then last year I ran for and obtained the title of Grand Warden. So I'm the Grand Warden of California. And so by virtue of that, I have a jewel that says my title, Grand Warden. And then I also have a collar, which is really unique and special. But this is my collar for this year. And it's from the Grand Lodge of California, and it's the Grand Warden collar.
Wow.
So
That is cool.
So yeah, in our lodges, and I've visited many lodges, each lodge has either chains or collars to designate your rank in the lodge. And so I'm very, did I think 18 years ago that I would ever be in this position? Not really.
Yeah.
I believe things happen for a reason. And a couple of years ago, I was approached and said, why don't you run for Grand Warden? And I did. And the first time I didn't make it, Rita, she got more votes than me. And I totally support her. I love her to death and we work well. Well, now I'm following her. So,
Nice.
yeah. So things happen for a reason. I believe that this is, and the only regret I have is that I've been going to the Oddfellows when my son, who's now 34, when he was like 6, we used to go to the pancake breakfast. And we'd go up there and they showed us the clock tower and showed us around. And nobody ever said, hey, would you like to join the Oddfellows? Because I would have joined, 40 years ago. But as it turns out, I joined 19 years ago. And it's one of the best things I've ever done. It's something that I've enjoyed doing from day one. And it's what I'm going to enjoy doing until the end of my days.
So if somebody wants to join, how do they go about doing that?
Well, come up to our Oddfellows on the first or third Thursday and come up and visit us. Or get a hold of any of our members and you'll see them out in public, or get a hold of me.
Is there a website that you guys have that
We do.
people
We have a
can
Facebook
email
page.
you or
Yeah.
something? Yeah. Okay.
So what's the email?
I don't know it offhand.
Okay.
But, we'll get it. 2 other things that happen with the Grand Lodge of California, and that is we have an entry in the Rose Parade every year for the last 60 or 70 years.
Mhm.
And so every year, we have a float in the parade, and it's really neat to see it. Yeah, and it's incredibly expensive to do it, but that's one of the things we fundraise is to do that, and that's to promote that we still exist. The other thing is we're one of the organizations that gets to lay a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknowns in Arlington National Cemetery.
Really?
Yeah, we get to do that. And I'll share one little tidbit of information, and that is if you're an Oddfellow and you're in good standing, which means you're up to date on your dues and you're in good standing, you can go to any lodge anywhere in the United States or another country. And I was in Victoria, Canada about 5-7 years ago. And my wife says, hey, look, there's an Oddfellows right here in the historic part of Victoria. And so that night my wife was not feeling well. So she said, why don't you go to the Oddfellows meeting? So I went over there and I was waiting, and pretty soon this guy shows up in a blue coat, red tie, and a white shirt. And I said, are you an Oddfellow? He goes, yeah. I said, hey, could I see your lodge? He goes, come on in. And I tried to dress as good as I can being on vacation. I just had a black polo shirt, but I went in, it was a gorgeous lodge, gorgeous. And the thing about lodges is when you walk into one, they're all pretty much designed the same. Some are just a little more ornate and beautiful than others. But when I got there, I said, do you guys have a meeting tonight? He goes, yeah. I said, do you think I could come to your meeting? He goes, are you a third degree member? I said, I am. He goes, do you know the password? And I go, well, I don't know if I know your password, but I know our password. He says, I'll let the Noble Grand vet you and see if she'll let you in. And he said, our Noble Grand is the first Noble Grand in the history of that province in Canada to be the Noble Grand. And so when she got there, she asked me some questions, And then she said, okay, why don't you join us tonight? She turned to one of the members and said, oh, go bring out the American flag. And I said, oh my gosh, I'm in another country. So when we started the meeting, they brought in the Canadian flag and we sang "O Canada," which I only knew the beginning of it. Yeah. But secondary and in a lower prominence was the American flag. And it's interesting to see, because normally we see the American flag in the place of prominence to the right of the speaker and the highest flag. Well, this was secondary. But two things occurred that night. They introduced me as a visiting brother, and I got to speak under good of the order, which means I could talk about anything. And I just told them, what a great thing to belong to an organization that even though I'm in another country, I'm accepted as an equal. And that can happen in any country. One of our members went to Germany, and same thing happened there. But that one, when they got ready to go out to the lodge hall, they lit torches and they walked off into the forest. And he said to me, and I was never seen again. Oh, wow. But when they got out there, they were all speaking in German, and he didn't know German. But because they were following our book and our protocol, he knew exactly where they were, and he was accepted as an equal in Germany.
Wow,
nice.
That is cool. So, well,
we are out of time.
Yeah, this was interesting. I really appreciate this. Yeah.
So membership wise, sounds like Santa Paula is doing pretty good.
We are. There are some lodges that are really struggling. And like I said, they're either aging out or we have a new expectation of people. The younger people, they want, as you know, instant gratification. They want digital stuff. And we still do things on paper and we still follow rituals, which I'm a traditionalist. And I believe we should remember our rituals because as they say, if we don't remember history, we're doomed to repeat it. Well, I always say that if we don't remember history, we're destined to forget it.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
That's a good, and we have it recorded.
Yeah. Great quote.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly appreciate the opportunity to speak again and talk a little bit or too much about the Oddfellows, but
this was
I really enjoy it.
It's great. Something brand new that,
Yeah, and we didn't even get a roast in.
No, come on now.
I mean, it's going to be a little jab.
He's earned it now.
Okay.
But thanks. That was great.
Well, thank you both.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
You're welcome anytime, Carlos.
Thank you.
So, John, do you have anything? I'll give you 30 seconds.
Cruise night next week, May 2nd. That's our May.
Oh my
I know
God.
we're starting in May. So yeah, that's what's coming up. So go to the chamber website, SantaPaulaChamber.com, and there's a few other events that are listed on there.
Okay. And as always, you can go to thomagic.org for the things that are going on at the House of Magic, as well as heritagevalleyca.org for the things that are going on within the valley.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, just a little secret. They're wrapping filming in Peru. And if you haven't been there, the sets that they built are phenomenal.
Right.
Phenomenal. So, not sure if I was supposed to let that cat out of the bag, but it's really
known
cool.
out there. But
Yeah.
It is.
So with that being said, I could.
911, what's your emergency?
There is no emergency. It's just the end of the show.
Yep.
We'll see y'all next week.
This has been a Rough Edge Studios production.